Today, we're going to unravel one of the most incredible turnarounds in all of history. We're talking about the life and the letters of the Apostle Paul, the man who went from the church's biggest threat to its greatest champion.
So let's start with just a number, 13. What's so special about 13? Well, in the New Testament, this number is everything. It's a huge deal.
Because 13 is the number of books written by a man whose first mission in life was to literally wipe out the very movement he would end up building. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is the story of Paul.
To really get a handle on his letters, we first have to get to know the man himself. And here's the thing, he didn't even start out as Paul. His transformation is central to the whole story.
See, he was first known as Saul of Tarsus, and he wasn't just some casual opponent of this new Christian movement. No way. He was a highly educated Pharisee, an absolute expert in Jewish law, and he channeled all that knowledge and passion into becoming a ruthless, organized persecutor of the first Christians.
But then, everything changed. There was this dramatic, life-altering encounter on the road to Damascus that didn't just flip his own world upside down, it literally bent the arc of history. In that moment, Saul the persecutor began his journey to becoming Paul the apostle.
And his new mission? It was enormous. It stretched across the known world, and it required a totally new way to lead and communicate over vast distances. This is where his famous letters come into play.
Just try to wrap your head around this number. Over 10,000 miles. That's the rough estimate of how far Paul traveled on his missionary journeys. He was always on the move, planting these new communities of believers all across the Roman Empire.
The book of Acts basically gives us his travel log. The first big trip took him through Cyprus and Asia Minor. On his second, he boldly pushed into Europe, founding major churches in places like Corinth. And the third journey was all about strengthening those churches, with a long stint in the hugely important city of Ephesus.
But you see the problem, right? He's just one guy. He can't be in 10 places at once. So he developed this brilliant method of long-distance leadership. He used letters, what we call epistles, to teach, to fix problems, and to just plain encourage these brand new, often struggling communities he left behind.
All right, let's dive into the first big category of his letters. These are the ones written to entire church congregations, and they were usually sent to tackle some very specific, real-world problems they were facing.
And these were not generic one-size-fits-all messages. Not at all. They were laser-focused. For the church in Corinth, a wild and crazy port city, he had to address all their internal squabbling and disunity. For the churches in Galatia, he had to pull them back from a dangerous slide into legalism. And for Ephesus, the big theme was unity, bringing everyone together.
And believe me, he did not hold back. Just listen to how he opens his letter to the Galatians. "O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you?" Wow, you can just feel the passion, the raw frustration in his voice as he fights to protect them from what he saw as a terrible error. And that frustration points us to probably his biggest, most revolutionary idea: justification by faith. This was a game changer. See, most religions back then were all about earning your way to God through rules and rituals. Paul comes along and says, no, you've got it backwards. Salvation isn't something you earn, it's a gift that you receive through faith.
He basically laid out two paths. There was the old way, this exhausting treadmill of trying to be good enough by following the law. And then there was the new way, a path of freedom based simply on trusting in Christ. For Paul, that one distinction changed literally everything.
But his writing wasn't just for big crowds. He also wrote these deeply personal, intimate letters to coach and mentor the next generation of church leaders.
So you have two very different styles. The church letters? They were public, full of deep doctrine and meant to be read out loud to everyone. But the pastoral letters? They were personal, super practical, and all about one-on-one mentorship.
We call these the pastoral epistles. In his letters to his young protege Timothy, he's basically giving him a crash course in how to be a good pastor, what to teach, who to appoint as leaders, how to handle conflict. And his letter to Titus? It's a field guide for organizing the messy, new churches on the island of Crete. These letters essentially became the first ever leadership manuals for the church.
But maybe the most powerful personal letter of all is the tiny one he wrote to a man named Philemon. It's a short little thing, but it packs such a punch. Okay, so here's the story. A slave named Onesimus runs away from his master Philemon. He somehow ends up meeting Paul, who's in prison, and becomes a Christian. So what does Paul do? He writes a personal letter and sends the runaway slave back to his master,
urging him to do something absolutely radical. He tells Philemon to take Onesimus back, saying, "Receive him, not now as a servant, but above a servant, a brother beloved." I mean, think about that. He's taking his biggest theological idea, that everyone is equal in Christ, and applying it to the most rigid social structure of his day. It's breathtaking. So, when you step back and look at the whole picture, what is the lasting impact of this man? This persecutor who became a pillar of the faith. Let's try to sum it all up.
Well, his contributions were just monumental. He laid down foundational Christian beliefs like salvation by grace. He fought tirelessly for unity in a fractured world. And, so importantly, he was the champion for including non-Jews, the Gentiles, which is what allowed Christianity to explode into a global faith. And of course, his letters are still full of timeless practical advice. The incredible result of all this writing, all this travel, all this passion, is that his collection of carefully crafted letters, this amazing blend of deep thinking and real-world advice, makes up almost half of the entire New Testament. Just think about that.
Which really leaves us with one final, kind of mind-blowing question to think about. How is it possible that a handful of letters, written 2,000 years ago to solve very specific problems in little communities, still shape the core beliefs of a massive, global faith today? That, right there, is the undeniable, enduring power of the Apostle Paul.